So, how is everyone? I hope you're all well. Do you know what? There's been so many things in this case that has tossed up what we'd call a red flag. Red flags. And look, there is always an alternative, and this channel is always about looking at all the alternatives. You know, at the moment we don't know what happened. A lot of the times we talk about what we think and feel in these cases when we look at stuff. We can't talk about anything beyond that. And we all, in our own ways, interpret what we see in different ways. But there comes a point where you've got to turn around and think to yourself, right, if this was an accident, if this was genuinely an accident, then what does that mean? You know, what are we ignoring? What are we accepting as just coincidence? And what would that have looked like from Kiely's perspective? So let's have a look. So what we've first of all got to do, we've got to look at the party as a whole and think, do you know what? It's not unusual that a party with 200 to 300 teenagers who live in a world that is social media driven, and the mobile phone has become an extension of their arms, and just accept that there were no videos. There were no pictures, there were no photos taken. They were just too busy doing other things. And it's just merely a coincidence that this just happened to be a party where a young girl lost her life, and nobody has any form of digital data that we know about at this stage. That could be changed in the future, but at now there's no digital data that proves anything or disproves anything. But that's just a coincidence. Now, with regards to Kiely in the car and driving the car, there's been some people who have said that she was that drunk she could hardly walk or talk. So if we go down, let's call this scenario A. Even though she was so drunk that she could hardly walk and talk, she got in her vehicle and proceeded to drive said vehicle home. She went the wrong way, and let's not forget that this was around the same time that there was some degree of exodus, mass exodus, where a lot of people left at the same time. So she's either followed everyone and gone the wrong way, or everyone's gone that way and she's gone that way. But she's ended up going in totally the opposite direction to what she could have. And do you know what? It could happen if she was under the influence of alcohol and not thinking straight and was unable to hardly walk or talk, because then you could assume that driving would be somewhat problematic. Now, we saw a video of the drive that she would have taken. It was pitch black, and let's not forget that in that video, the moonlight situation was around 5%. On the night that Kiely had her accident, it was around 60%. So it would have been somewhat lighter, but it's still nighttime in an area that she may or may not have been kind of familiar with. She's driven a car. She has hit the water. She's drunk. The water has, it's come into the vehicle, and the vehicle has proceeded, as it has filled up, to float out into the water further and descend into the depth of the water. Now, Adventures with Purpose videos would show those the windows were open. So she's either opened the windows in a panic, or the windows were already open. The water would have come in, but she's drunk, and that has caused her to panic and try to get away from the water. She's opened the windows, all the windows are already open, and she's thought the best thing to do is get away because she's drunk. And it could happen. It could happen. I've looked at the scenario of where sadly her body had ended up in that cargo area at the rear end of that CRV, and I think to myself, could she have got into the back there? And I'm thinking to myself, do you know what? Over time, perhaps so. With the car upside down, you could have perhaps slipped along the roof and into that back area. So I think if the car was completely inverted, yes, it's a lot more likely that it could happen. But things will come out later, and I'm just speculating on what we can see. So that's what we're saying. We're saying that the fact that she was drunk led her to not react correctly, and sadly, rather than utilising the seemingly viable escape routes, at least two of them it seems, because we've got a broken window on one side and an open window the other side, and with those being open, there would have been equalisation in that vehicle quickly as well, so the doors would have even opened, but we know that there was no attempt at opening the doors. Anyway, so is it possible this could have been an accident? It still is, but there's still a lot of things that we would have to ignore. We would have to then take into consideration that this conversation with Nick, that happened before the party, and there was elements that were said by Kylie's friends that would have meant that that couldn't have been before the party, because they said that she was tied up doing other things then. So there are things to support this being after the party, but perhaps it was just someone completely different. It was just someone. A lot of teenagers look the same, guys, don't they? You know, blonde-haired girls, and you know, the same with the boy. You know, the San Francisco hat, which is popular as fuck. So you know, we are. It could be say that in some elements we're reaching, we're making it fit, but the sad thing is it does fit. Then we've got scenario B, and that is that Kylie wasn't drunk at all, because we can't ascertain as to whether she was or not. And her mum basically stated that she wouldn't drink and drive. We've got a scenario that seems to say that Kylie was texting during that party. She had got on the phone, she had utilised her phone to contact her mum to say she'd be leaving in around 40 minutes time, and then she would be home. And she'd text Jagger, she'd had a conversation with Sammy as well. So she was compos mentis enough to communicate with people in a way that would say that she was not in that bad of a state, that she could hardly walk and talk. So there's your first kind of issue that you have. So then we've got a girl who, let's say, she can drive. She is kind of aware. She's aware. But then she still makes a mistake of going that way when she should have gone that way, while everybody else is doing the same thing, which is bizarre, because you've got to think, well, she must know which way is home. And why would she seemingly go in a completely opposite direction of everybody else? And why, if that is the case, did nobody notice it? Why did nobody see it? So anyway, she's then headed down. Again, we're saying around 60% moonlight. She's gone down. She's hit the water. The car doesn't immediately sink. You don't go straight into the water and you're immediately under the water like SpongeBob. The car is going to hit the water. There was going to be an impact. There was going to be resistance. But then once it goes to a certain degree, the car is going to be taken up by the water. It's going to be lifted. It's going to drift. It's going to sink. And it's going to fill as it sinks. The windows were open. We don't know. Now, the passenger side window in that video it seemed to be wound all the way down. So if that was wound all the way down, there would have been a period of time that Kylie could have got out of that window quite easily. You know, we're trying to then say that Kylie didn't have the foresight, the mindset, and let's not forget, Kylie's not stupid. She's not a stupid girl. She is a smart girl. And I just can't see for the life of me why, if she was sober enough to send the text messages that she sent to the people that she sent them to, and drive and operate that vehicle to that point, that getting out of an open window to save your life then becomes a problem. Let's not forget, she was either driving the vehicle then without a seatbelt, or she'd taken the seatbelt off. So she must have been in the vehicle knowing what was happening if she was driving and doing something. So what was it that she was doing? Is it purely that she did just panic and try and get away from the water? But then why would you try and get away from the water when you've got two windows either side that you can escape the car. Was she unable to interpret what was going to happen if she stayed in the vehicle? Because for somebody to go to the back of that car, the only thing that they're going to do is they're going to end up further in a muddle. And can we really say that that's what she would have done if she was sober? This is just my critical mind, critical thinking about the accident itself and what it would take for us to think, look, she had an accident, this was an accident, there was no red flags, there's no nothing, there's no nefarious stuff, there's no, no foul play. This is just a girl who went to a party, got in a car, went to drive home and drove into a reservoir. Does it fit? Can you make it fit? Without, having to ignore too much. But then what's that balance where you say you've ignored too much to make the accident narrative fit? You tell me, and I'll catch you all in the next one.